In the world of global politics, some messages change everything. Sometimes it's not the loudest voices that shift the course of history, but the subtle signals sent behind closed doors, in the corridors of power, and in the carefully chosen words of diplomats. Even when delivered in whispers, these quiet exchanges can carry the weight of nations, shaping alliances and rivalries that define our era. Recently, Beijing made a striking declaration: China cannot allow Russia to lose the war in Ukraine. This statement, though simple, sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and global capitals alike. This isn't just preference, it's a strategic commitment, signaling a deepening alliance between China and Russia against the Western-led order. It's a message that China is willing to stake its reputation and resources to ensure Moscow's survival. For years, China has walked a diplomatic tightrope, calling for peace while refusing to condemn Moscow or join sanctions. This balancing act allowed Beijing to maintain economic ties with the West while quietly supporting Russia's position. But this latest stance reveals that China's neutrality was always a facade. Behind the scenes, Beijing has been preparing for a world where it must openly challenge Western influence. For Beijing, Ukraine is a test of Western resolve, a proxy conflict with global stakes. The outcome will shape not only the future of Eastern Europe, but also the balance of power in Asia and beyond. A Russian defeat would embolden the US and NATO, isolating China in its rivalry with Washington. It would send a message that Western alliances can dictate the fate of nations, undermining China's ambitions in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Ensuring Russia's survival is now a matter of self-preservation for China, not just partnership. Beijing sees Moscow as a crucial buffer against Western pressure, and a partner in reshaping the global order. This transforms the war. It's no longer just Kyiv versus Moscow, but a contest with two superpowers backing opposing sides. The conflict has become a stage for a broader struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, East and West. The world must now face the reality of a prolonged, high-stakes struggle shaped by the ambitions of China and the West. As the lines harden, every move in Ukraine echoes far beyond its borders, setting the tone for a new era of global competition and uncertainty. The message wasn't delivered at a press conference but in a closed-door meeting in Brussels. China's top diplomat Wang Yi told EU officials bluntly, "China will not let Russia be defeated in Ukraine." This was a rare moment of clarity, stripping away China's usual diplomatic ambiguity. European hopes that Beijing might help end the war were dashed. China's priority is preventing a strategic loss for its key partner. For Beijing, the war is about countering US influence, not defending Ukraine's sovereignty. This private admission forced Europe to confront a new reality. China has quietly chosen its side. Any pressure on Russia must now account for Beijing's economic and diplomatic backing. The EU faces a far more complicated challenge as China's support for Russia becomes impossible to ignore. China's support for Russia is pure strategy, not sentiment. Both powers see the US as the main obstacle to their ambitions, forging a no-limits partnership. Russia is China's strategic buffer. If Moscow falls, Beijing could be surrounded by US allies. Preventing a Russian collapse is a core Chinese security interest. Russia also supplies China with energy, resources, and advanced military tech, vital for China's growth and security. Since the war began, this partnership has only deepened, with Russia redirecting energy exports eastward. China is also learning from the conflict, studying Western sanctions, military aid, and Russia's battlefield performance. These lessons are crucial for China's own plans, especially regarding Taiwan. By propping up Russia, China gains a partner and a real-world case study for future confrontations. It's a pragmatic alliance, driven by mutual interests and a shared rivalry with the West. China's long-term goal is clear. By the middle of this century, it aims to become the world's preeminent power, surpassing even the United States in global influence, economic strength, and technological innovation. This ambition is not just about military might, but about reshaping the international order to better reflect China's interests and values. Every major global event, from regional conflicts to economic crises, is carefully analyzed in Beijing through the lens of this overarching ambition. The ongoing war in Ukraine, for example, is seen not just as a distant conflict, but as a pivotal moment that could shift the balance of power. The conflict in Europe has drawn significant attention and resources from the United States, creating a strategic window for China to expand its influence and assert its interests more aggressively in the Indo-Pacific region, especially around Taiwan and the South China Sea. By aligning itself with Russia, China seeks to undermine the unity of the US-led alliance system. Beijing hopes that by supporting Moscow, it can deepen divisions within the West, making it harder for the US and its allies to present a united front on issues ranging from security to trade. Beijing is betting that Ukraine fatigue, the growing weariness and political divisions in Western countries over the prolonged conflict, will gradually erode the resolve of NATO and the European Union. At the same time, Chinese strategists know that a decisive Russian defeat could reinvigorate Western alliances, so they tread carefully. China's nuanced stance on the Ukraine war also sends a powerful message to the global South. By positioning itself as a counterweight to Western dominance, Beijing appeals to countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that are seeking alternatives to the traditional Western-led order. The growing China-Russia partnership is at the heart of Beijing's vision for a new multipolar world, one where power is distributed among several major players rather than dominated by the United States and its allies. This axis challenges the very foundation of current US priorities. By keeping Russia's economy afloat through trade and investment, China is not only supporting a key partner, but also accelerating the global shift toward a system less constrained by American economic and financial power. This is a high-stakes gamble for Beijing. By tying its fate to an unpredictable partner like Russia, China risks entanglement in unforeseen crises. Yet, Chinese leaders believe that the potential rewards, reshaping the global order and expanding their influence, far outweigh the risks. Ultimately, China's strategic decisions today will reverberate for years, if not decades, shaping the trajectory of global politics and determining the balance of power in the 21st century. China hasn't sent weapons to Russia, but its support is vital. Trade between the two has soared, with China buying Russian oil and gas, funding Moscow's war. China is now Russia's top supplier of goods, including dual-use tech like microchips and machine tools. These components found in Russian drones and missiles are essential for Moscow's military industry. Financially, Chinese banks and the yuan have become lifelines for Russia, helping it bypass Western sanctions. This creates a parallel economic system less vulnerable to US pressure. The West is alarmed, but policing this indirect support is nearly impossible. China uses complex trade networks to maintain plausible deniability. This ambiguity lets Beijing fuel Russia's war machine without crossing Western red lines. It's a masterclass in shadow support, critical but hard to punish. The EU faces a painful dilemma: support Ukraine, but avoid a damaging conflict with China, its key trading partner. Europe's economic ties to China run deep, making tough action risky. EU leaders warn Beijing against aiding Russia, but broad sanctions are off the table. Europe can't afford a trade war. Internal divisions complicate matters. Some states want a hard line, others fear economic fallout. The EU's strategy is de-risking, not decoupling, reducing dependence on China in key sectors while keeping trade open. It's a delicate balancing act with no easy answers. For now, Europe walks a tightrope, caught between its security needs and economic realities. The outcome will shape Europe's power and independence in a new world order. The Ukraine war, now in its second year, and China's increasingly assertive role on the world stage are accelerating a seismic shift in the global order. What once seemed stable is now in flux, as old alliances are tested and new partnerships emerge. The conflict in Ukraine is not just a regional crisis, it's a catalyst, exposing deep fractures and forcing nations to reconsider their positions in a rapidly changing world. The unipolar era, dominated by a single superpower, is over. We're entering a world split between two major blocs, reminiscent of the Cold War but with new players and stakes. On one side, the United States and its traditional allies. On the other, a coalition led by China and Russia, each vying for influence and shaping the rules of global engagement. The US and its allies now face a rising China-Russia axis, united by their opposition to American dominance and a shared vision of a multipolar world. This partnership is not just symbolic, it's strategic, with both nations coordinating on economic, technological, and military fronts. Their cooperation extends to joint military exercises, the creation of alternative global institutions like the BRICS Bank, and frequent use of veto power to block Western-led initiatives at the United Nations. Together, they challenge the existing order and offer new models of governance and development. This growing divide complicates global cooperation on urgent issues like climate change, nuclear security, and economic stability. International forums are increasingly gridlocked, with consensus harder to achieve as rival blocs push competing agendas. Meanwhile, many nations in the global south remain non-aligned, wary of being drawn into a new Cold War. These countries seek to maximize their own interests, balancing relationships with both East and West while avoiding entanglement in great power rivalries. China actively courts these countries, offering infrastructure projects, investment, and partnerships without the political conditions often attached to Western aid. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road, Beijing expands its influence across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. For Ukraine, this means a longer, more brutal war, one that has become a global proxy struggle, with weapons, money, and political support flowing in from all sides. The conflict's outcome is now tied to the broader contest between rival powers. Ukraine's fate depends not just on the courage of its people or the battles fought on its soil, but on the strategic moves and decisions made in Washington, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing. Each capital weighs its interests, knowing the stakes extend far beyond Eastern Europe. The world is dividing along new lines, and Ukraine stands at the very center of this historic contest, a symbol of the shifting sands of global alliances and a reminder that the future of international order is being written right now. The China-Russia partnership threatens global stability on multiple fronts. It undermines the post-1-2 system that forbids changing borders by force. China's shield for Russia sets a precedent that could embolden other aggressors. The alliance fuels a new arms race, forcing the West to prepare for conflict on two fronts. Economic fragmentation is accelerating, with rival blocs forming around the dollar and the yuan. This disrupts supply chains, raises costs, and slows growth, ending the era of hyperglobalization. The China-Russia axis also challenges democracy, promoting authoritarian models and spreading disinformation. Their cooperation makes it harder for democracies to defend their values and interests. The struggle is about more than territory. It's a contest of ideas and systems. The outcome will shape the world's political landscape for generations. The world stands at a crossroads with the future uncertain. For Ukraine, survival depends on Western unity and resilience against a Russia backed by China. The EU must decide if it can turn economic power into geopolitical strength or remain divided and dependent. China faces its own gamble. Will supporting Russia boost its rise or backfire and isolate Beijing? The world must ask, are we heading for a new Cold War, or can rival blocs find ways to cooperate? The choices made now will define the next era. One thing is clear, complacency is over and a turbulent new chapter has begun.